Okay.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
And then I'm live.
Mm.
Oh my god, we're doing it.
すごく感謝です。
Okay.
Ah, 北海道？あ、北海道の方なんですね。ありがとうございます。本当に。
Can I see how many viewers I have? Hey everybody. Webcam, manage, stream. Okay, so
じゃあでも、あ、そっか、そうですね。でもそれだけでは自身の成長を知る上ではあんまり役に立ちませんみたいな。
current viewers. Okay, there it is. Let's do pretty long. Abraham Salazar. Sapalala, salala, sala. Shalala, shalala. Okay.
そうですね。
So actually, wouldn't Leo would be off fair, right? Because the Leos. Hey, how are you doing today? Yeah, how are you doing today? Because there's so much to do, but I don't think that there's things that we can say about many things to say, but if there's the one who does the thing.
再発とかめちゃくちゃ言いますからね。
Okay. Christian.
ここでもう回復出てた方が後のためになるの。
I have a woman. For the women. was she accepted? So okay.
鍵括弧に書いていいですか？うん。こっちの方がいいと思います。はい。チャピーすごいね。本当に。じゃあここ消します。
Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, everybody. The podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hyper-sexualized times of ours. You see, when you do something too often, sometimes you just go a little bit crazy doing it again and
いい
again.
と思います。
Let me try that as normal as possible. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hyper-sexualized times of ours. Great. So today is about energy, everybody, and I'm filled with it. I want to really, this is a very important episode. Don't skip it. I have slides for you if you want, if you're a visual learner. You can check out the podcast on YouTube, or you could just listen, whatever. But it's a deep dive into how to invest your energy wisely. This is one of the most fundamental and important things that you can ever learn and practice in your life. There are a lot of theories about addiction. There's a lot of theories about how to lead a meaningful life. And in High Noon, we have a lot of ways for you to harness your sexual energy and to live together with God in terms of your sexuality, but in general. But it all requires energy at the end of the day. So this is kind of like the base of all that you can do in your life, and in terms of building sexuality, your sexual integrity, and like just enjoying life, requires you to know how to harness your energy and use it towards things that you care about. That's what this episode is about. I spared no expenses in terms of my own energy to make sure that this is a great episode. So please listen intently, figure out how you can invest your energy so that you can create a life that you never want to escape from, that you never want to run away from, a life that you love, that you can welcome all sorts of people into and take care of. That's the life that we were born to live. So let's figure out how to use our energy wisely. Peace. Welcome back, everybody. I feel like a stranger in my own podcast today because I haven't had this setup in a while. This is like my home studio, and it is so nice to have your own home studio. I was away for the past month in Canada visiting family. It's a cold place. I'm not gonna lie. When you grew up in Canada, shout out to all my Canadians out there. It's so annoying when people are like, "Oh, you're from Canada? I heard it's cold," and you're like, "Ah, Canada isn't all the Northwest Territories." Shout out to anybody who knows what the Northwest Territories are. Probably don't if you're American. Americans, I've done this. I've seen documentaries about this. Don't know Canadian geography. It's amazing. They just know all the states. They're taught all the states, and then they're taught that there's some pink thing on the globe or the map above them that's called Canada. They don't know about provinces. They don't know about territories. Anyway, so it's frustrating growing up in Canada because anybody outside of it is like, it's gotta be so cold. And I was from Toronto proper, city boy. And it's like, it's the same as New York. In fact, if you just go south of the border to New York State, upstate New York, way colder and snowier. Buffalo, New York. Shout out to strip malls, everybody. Anyway, I am telling you all this because when I went back to Canada after many years, it's flipping cold. It's so cold. And I was like, man, the stereotype is kind of true. And everybody was like, oh, it's never this cold. I was like, it's a coinky dink. Because it was, we were in a condo downtown. and we just had to walk 2 blocks to the grocery store. And sometimes we could barely make it. Honestly, sometimes we were doubting our decisions in life.
And actually, I want to. There's a specific episode I want to listen to.
なんかまあこのアセンドで言うとね3ヶ月か言われますね。
Gene.
でもぜひプログラムに参加している期間みたいな。
Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times. Andrew Love here, and today I am Benji Free. This episode is Benji Free. We have a special guest known as Gene Honeycutt to you, and to everybody actually, because that's just his name. And he was on the podcast probably 3 years ago. I've recommended several people listen to his episode. He unpacked his journey with SSA, and he now just had his second kid. And it's so cool.
Now he has 2 kids.
To meet somebody like him with a story of, like, he's really unpacked and understood his story and where his feelings come from, understanding his healthy emotions and his healthy longings, but also unpacking and understanding his trauma and how they impacted his life. So this episode really gets into lust. And the cool part about lust is that typically we're just caught up in the swell of lust, like the wave, and we just surf that wave towards our own demise, right? Towards porn, towards just acting out. But what if you could understand what's behind that lust? And it could be as simple as Gene unpacks as a desire to want to be young and free and roam wild in the forest, and yet it gets transmuted into this dysfunction by wanting to seek out a particular type of pornography. So I think this is a super impactful episode because it helps you see the man behind the curtains, this thing that controls our actions, the emotions behind the emotions. So if you'd like to understand yourself, by golly gosh, please listen to this. Take notes in your heart at least, if not on paper. Or do people still take notes on paper? Take notes in your digital computing device, whatever the case may be. Let's get into it. All right, so we're back with.
Oh,
I don't know. Is this your? I think this is your 3rd time back, Gene. Is that true? Is this fake news? Is this real?
Second.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did one other podcast. I did have a mention. I got mentioned in someone else's podcast.
Okay.
But that's it.
Yeah, good. So in essence, this is your 2nd time. In mention, it's probably like your 5th time, because I've Googled, or not Googled, I've searched your name in our website and it comes up quite a bit. So we talk about you a lot.
Oh, is that
in
right?
a good way. In a good way, yeah. No gossip, promise.
Oh, I'm flattered.
But we're starting to work more with Gene, and if you know, you know, and you'll find out more about that if you need. But basically we're collaborating with Gene because he's one of us for sure, and he has diverted all of his professional attention onto helping people, and he's got a lot of great insights because now this is his world, that you're steeped in it, right? So
right.
Well, do you want to talk about that? So you were a school teacher. You and I had just a private conversation about Acton Academy because I was obsessed with it. I helped to get one started in Denver, and then all of a sudden you were going to be a teacher in one. So your vocational trajectory was very clear. You're going to be a teacher. And then all of a sudden you took either a sharp left turn or maybe it's a U-turn. I don't know which direction, but you deviated from the chosen path. So what happened?
So I was really interested in starting a school, and that was like my end goal. And well, I was, it's kind of funny because my story is same-sex attraction, and it was like such a big story, and so it's always like same-sex attraction, and then I finally got to this point in my life where it really wasn't my story anymore primarily. like I got married and I was became obsessed with my wife, and we have kids now, and
Uh-huh.
it was almost like a relief because like I don't have to be so immersed in like same sex attraction is all you think of when you think of Gene Honeycutt. Um, and so it's kind of funny for me to be doing what I'm doing now. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like I started out by saying it's my neglected calling, meaning that I felt called to to
Mhm.
endeavor in this area, but also didn't want to do it. And I think that's because if I look at like my entire life, starting from elementary school, starting even before elementary school, but all through my schooling, I was always very quiet. I People didn't know what my voice sounded like, and so my main way of interacting with people is pleasing and appeasing. And I'd even lie to people, like coworkers. They'd start rambling on about something, and I would be not interested at all. But I'd pretend and nod and smile and be like, yeah, 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 and
Mm.
say exactly what I knew they'd like for me to say. And then I felt terrible because I'm like lying and pretending like I'm interested when I'm not. Um, and but
As
that's
you
my whole
say
life,
that,
to please and
I
appease
wonder how
and
many.
be agreeable.
Okay. I was just thinking about how many times have you done that with me or with the High Noon staff where you pretended to be interested in what we had to say.
Oh, don't get insecure, Andrew. Don't worry. Um, um, but it's funny for me to look at where I am now, because when I look at my story is inherently offensive. Um, no matter which way I would turn with it, it's going to be an offensive story. And so
Mm.
I feel like I've been given an offensive story and a
Mm.
very agreeable personality. So it seems almost contradictory, but I really feel like this is where I need to be. This is where my voice really needs to come out, where it's been stifled for so long. So it does feel like a calling, like my path, my journey, everything I've been through is bringing me here. So at this time in my life, this is where I feel really called to be, in this area of same-sex attraction and lust and getting sexuality and sex right.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I think every Canadian listening knows exactly who you are, especially every church member, that they are involved with something controversial by proximity, but are naturally an agreeable person and don't want
Right,
to
right,
cause a
right,
fuss, right? I definitely know the
right,
feeling.
right.
I definitely know it. So, you just felt like the calling was always there, but the timing wasn't right until recently, and now you just acquiesced
Right.
to what needs to happen.
Yeah, I feel like the timing is right. And part of it, to be frank, is that I wanted, I guess I was getting jealous of everyone who's working from home. And I knew I did not want to teach from home, or do any sort of
Yeah.
schooling from home, like schooling other children. So it just seemed like the right timing when, we got pregnant with our second kid, and it seemed like, yeah, I would love to be around home more, which is actually the opposite of what I grew up in. My dad was always gone. And so now I feel like called to be very around and in my kids' lives, and to support my wife. So we're just fully entrepreneurial, and we juggle the kids. And my wife does her businesses, I do mine. And it's working. It's quite scary, to be honest. But it we're kind of, it's kind of our leap of faith, and um, it pushed me. It was that final push to say, we can switch careers and do something that is very meaningful to me, and it is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And I've been doing it on the side, supporting men for I think 7 years. But now I want to like really dedicate my energy towards it.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I mean, it's a great thing for society that we now have a Gene Honeycutt fully enrolled in this process of helping others. So Gene is becoming well, you already are a coach, but you're becoming specialized in sexuality, healthy sexuality, and helping men with SSA, but also just helping people. I mean, men and women with various things, or just men.
Just men.
Just
Although
men,
I have
okay.
coached some women, but that's not that was more, it was a
Life
different
coaching.
project.
Sure.
And I do sex addiction recovery primarily.
Yeah, so that's where this gets juicy, everybody, because when I was asking Gene about what he would like to talk about, something that's really on his mind, he brought up the topic of lust. And recently we were on a call because High Noon is going to be collaborating a lot with Gene. And he brought up the topic of lust. And I realized that it's a very important topic that we haven't really focused on enough and understood enough. So I really want to unpack that for all of you listening and for myself, because lust has infiltrated almost every aspect of our lives, right? And it's lusting for stuff isn't necessarily inherently bad, but in the way that it's normally experienced, it's typically unhealthy, right? That it like people have associated food with sex and all sorts of things. They've mashed all of their experiences together, and it's hard to sort through what's healthy and what's not. And lust is a big part of that hodgepodge. So I just would love to figure out more about lust. And so I guess it's a big topic, but like, what do you think that most people don't understand about lust? Like, what's a common misunderstanding that you see?
Yeah, great question. So it, I feel very called to this topic of lust, and I kind of feel like there's two half truths that are kind of out there. So you have more of this like religious community half truth, and so church culture often the uh, really stands upon the foundation of living for a higher purpose and morality, incredibly important. And it's like a half truth that is really needed for the other side, which I'll say is more like the secular community. But the half truth that the secular community is really standing on is uh, love. And it's this really beautiful, like, we are not ashamed of you. You can be like wholly yourself, everything about you. You can be authentic to yourself, and we love and accept you. And this is incredibly important too, and something that I think more the church communities really need to learn from uh, this unconditional grace. So, and that's just kind of generalizing, but I feel like what I want to do is kind of marry these half truths, because if you're standing in just the half truth of uh, of grace and love and acceptance, that is so great. But the pitfall is that there could be a lack of discernment. And so what I mean like that by that is, so I watched a lot of gay porn, and there are people who really think that the only way I can become happy is to divorce my wife and find a boyfriend, and that is the only way that I'm going to become happy. And I know it's rubbish, but
It's convincing.
it's kind of a common it's a kind of a common thought. And
Sure.
when people tell that to me, I get pretty angry, because I think, you have no idea what you're talking about, and you don't know me. um, but but it makes sense why they may feel this way, because the reality is that there are a lot of men who have cheated on their wives and decided to get a boyfriend. So which brings me to want to talk about the other half truth, which is, if you stand upon morality and living for a higher purpose, this is great. But the pitfall that I see is a denial, like denying a part of myself.
Hmm.
And I think that this is why there are all these stories on the internet about the man who marries the woman and then, like hides his, gay porn from her. And then at some point just can't take it anymore. And, their marriage explodes.
Yeah.
And it's terribly sad. But it's this, I think it's this denial of, um, of a part of themselves that you can only deny your feelings for so long before they just simmer and bubble up and kind of burst out.
Yeah.
And I
I think it's a really important point that we can't, if we just keep our feelings tucked away, conveniently hidden, it's not going to be productive in the long run. And it's oftentimes very painful.
I've heard many stories. Sometimes they burst out and it's ugly.
Oh yeah. Well, especially when there's kids involved.
So I feel like, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it. What I would like to do is actually bring both half truths together and have it so that we can live moral lives, distinguishing what is good and what's really not good. This is incredibly important, but also to honor our whole selves and be truly authentic. And I think that's incredibly important too.
Well, there's so much nuance that gets trounced upon in our society because you're asked, in many ways, you're forced to choose a side of an incomplete conversation. So you have to side with one or the other, either the religious perspective or the secular perspective. And oftentimes, neither one have been fully elucidated or elaborated upon. And so you have to agree with something that doesn't quite really make sense if you dig deep enough, because there's a lot missing. And that nuance is so in the religious, and we talk a lot about this. We have a talk about, your relationship with your ideals. And a lot of times, if somebody's just living by their ideals, but they're not doing it, they're just doing it with their body, but not with their heart and their mind, because it's hard for them to buy into it, then they form a very dysfunctional relationship with their ideals. And they might be living a religious life per se, but they're internally just rotting. And at some point, that's going to become a very big problem. And in many cases, they'll end up blaming their ideals for their problems. Oh, it's stupid religion is like, and you see this online all the time. I used to be this. Right. I thought it was just our church, like ex Moonies, this kind of thing. But when you dig deep, it's actually, there's ex-Catholics, ex-Mormons, ex-Christians, there's ex-atheists, there's ex-Republicans, ex-liberal. It's everybody who uses the external measurement of that thing that they belong to as their identity, but they do it without fully understanding it or doing it with their heart and that. But then conversely, what you're talking about with the full grace and acceptance, this idea of like, we love you unconditionally is not sincere either, because like you see, this happens in porn all the time. You see, well, it's consenting adults having sex. And then on its surface, you can't argue that because they are consenting adults. But then when you get into, well, what is consent? Because many of these people are traumatized. Are they consenting with their traumatic selves, their traumatized selves, or their better judgment? Are they on drugs and just trying to feed themselves, and they're consenting with their addiction? Like consent is actually, there's a lot of nuance that we used to appreciate in society, but now we want even kids to have consent. Just by the way, I found out that in Canada, in British Columbia, they're pushing for, in the province of British Columbia, pushing for kids to be able to consensually, like as a kid, you could say, I want fentanyl. and they could be granted fentanyl without their parents' knowledge.
Mm.
And so you're saying that a kid
Mm.
could get access to a highly addictive drug because they consented to it, but kids have always been protected from consent,
Right.
because they can't consent because they don't have a prefrontal cortex. They don't have the ability to judge well. So yeah, anyway, both of these sides
Right.
lack the nuance of this conversation that's very usually generalized, and it's pretty sad because
Right.
a lot of victims end up feeling forced. Like you said, if you didn't really dig deep into this topic, you would maybe have guilt issues, like, why am I married and with kids when I should really be living my authentic self, when that's not necessarily your authentic self. That's a version of your identity that was born out of trauma and pain and stuff that you've unpacked now. So
Right.
there's so much nuance that gets lost and murdered. Honestly, nuance is getting murdered in our society. It's a crime.
Yeah. And I know because I'm like working with more and more people, I hear more and more stories, and there's so much consensual sex that is so damaging to their spirit.
Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
generally.
yeah, yeah. So, I've heard a lot of sexual abuse stories, and it's like consensual, but there's grooming and manipulation, and that cliche, hurt people. It's like this cycle of abuse. Like the abuser ends up abusing other people, and then you have all these other abused people. But it's like, because they got abused by an abuser, it's feeding into their lust, and now they get a kick out of being the abuser. Tragic, it's this vicious cycle, and I just know a lot of people who are devastated.
Yeah.
So
without getting into details, I do want to mention it's something that I've never said publicly, but I used to live in North Hollywood, which at that time was, I heard, the porn production capital of the entire world. It was in the valley, the valley of kind of Los Angeles area. And I had a coworker. I worked at like a PO box place, and the coworker was a big part of the gay scene out there. And he was proudly gay, but he would go to these parties that there were sex parties, and he was even mortified by the fact that they'd be having these I don't want to get into details, but basically people could observe each other in the act of sex. And there were many, he was disturbed by the amount of people that were replaying their childhood sexual abuse publicly for other people to see. And even him at that time was like, this is really messed up, and I see it all the time. I don't understand it. And so it needs to be unpacked, right? Like the fact that so many people, when they're sexually abused, become sexually abusers needs to be understood. And the fact that porn now is considered in many circles sexual abuse, how do you think that factors into your childhood, right? The fact that you're watching some very heinous scenarios as a child, that's no kid should be exposed to that. That's a form of abuse, because you're being exposed to something that you shouldn't be, that's too big for you.
Yes.
And so how do you think that's going to play out in your future if you've been sexually abused? You got to look out for that and understand it, essentially.
Right. If we cannot transform our trauma, we will transmit it. It's like inevitable.
Ooh. I've never heard that. Is that like a saying, or did he just coin that?
I took it from Jay Stringer.
Okay. I've never heard that. Is that
if we cannot transform, right. If we cannot transform our trauma, we will transmit it. It's like inevitable.
Ooh. I've never heard that. Is that like a saying, or did he just coin that?
I took it from Jay Stringer.
Okay.
But I feel I really like Jay Stringer. He talks about a generational character as someone who's willing to metabolize as much generational toxins and poison as they can so that future generations don't have to deal with it. So beautiful. And so I feel like my job is to do my healing work so that my kids get to stand on a higher platform. Um, yeah, that's my hope.
Got it. Yeah, that's beautiful. And so you are standing on this foundation where you've done a lot of work. You understand more the inner workings of your own SSA journey. And we've talked about that in the previous podcast episode. But
right.
one thing that at that time when I interviewed you, you hadn't studied to the same extent as you now understand, which is
right.
lust at large and how lust is fueled and
yes.
what is this thing.
Yes.
So I really want to unpack this thing. I don't know how to go about it. Lead the way.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to dig into my story.
Okay.
And I feel like going back to these kind of two half truths, I feel like there is our spirituality and there is our humanity. And I think God's not ashamed of either of these aspects of us. And so I think what's been my journey is actually how to honor mostly my humanity. And that's especially recently been my journey. And so I'd love to share a bit about that. So maybe I'll start with something that happened recently. So I haven't watched porn in 9 years. So gay porn does not have a draw to me anymore. And I haven't fantasized and masturbated for 6 years. So that actually also doesn't have a big draw. But having said all that, and having been married for 4 years and having a lot of beautiful moments with my wife and having a lot of beautiful times where we've had sex, I was at a men's retreat in last spring, and I noticed that someone was bending over and this guy's underwear was poking out. And so I just noticed it, and it was white underwear. And I noticed that caused arousal for me. And so I'm feeling kind of like ashamed of this. Like I should be over this. I have a great wife. She's pretty. Like why is this like some guy bending over arousing me and causing me to do a double take? We later end up in, well, it's pretty cold. We're in Idaho and it's cold, and we're wearing pants in the morning, but when the sun comes out, it actually got quite warm. So, we're all changing into shorts, and I noticed that I walk into a room where he's undressing, and I noticed that he's wearing white underwear, but he's not wearing white briefs. And so suddenly the arousal disappeared. And so I just looked at that and I got kind of curious about it. And I thought, okay, what's really going on here? There was some sort of arousal around this prospect that he might be wearing white briefs. So this takes me back to when I was 13. I was living in Korea by myself. My parents weren't there. I was doing the GOP program. I'm not sure if they even still have that, but I was doing the GOP program in Korea, and there were, okay, look at that. There were 11 other boys, and it's early on in the year, and I'm just trying to like fit in and belong. And, these are my 11 other brothers, right? Supposedly, that I want to make friends with. and they're all making friends with each other, and I'm like wanting to kind of fit in. Um, it's When I went to Korea, I packed only white briefs. It wasn't, and it didn't strike me as anything like weird about that until I actually got to Korea and boys would talk about tidy whities in a derogatory way and make fun of them. And obviously, they weren't cool to wear. So I became kind of paranoid. I didn't want anyone to see me in my underwear because I'm just trying to fit in, and obviously they're not cool. Um, and so I walk into this room, and there's 4 boys, and I'm kind of rigid and uncomfortable, trying to laugh along with someone's crude joke, and then a bigger boy gets behind me without me noticing, and the next thing I know, he pulls my pants down, and my tidy whities are exposed. I'm exposed. And I can't help but feel like I should have outgrown them. And I feel
So
like a
just
little boy.
a wave, a tsunami of shame and embarrassment, like face bright red, that kind of feeling.
Yeah, humiliated. I felt humiliated. But here's the kicker. So I pull my pants up, and I'm kind of proud of past Gene. I actually tried to smack the kid in the face. But when I smacked him, he's a bigger kid and he's fast. He grabs my hand and he smiles. And I just know I'm not going to be able to get this guy back. No justice is going to be had. And I end up freezing, and I just flop like a rigid board onto the nearest bed. And I just lay there, like my face smushed into my pillow for hours. I felt weak and pathetic. And this goes back to, if anyone's listened to my other podcast, when I was 7 years old, pretty much the exact same thing happened. I got my pants pulled down by my siblings, and they put a diaper on me, and I felt like a baby. And I felt like a baby because my brother always called me a crybaby. He'd always make me cry, and so I have this theme of like being a baby, being this little boy. And am I surprised that it took me so long to actually claim that I am a man? I was okay being a guy, a dude, but I never felt like a man.
Sure.
As an adult, not until I did a retreat where I finally claimed my manhood, and I think I was 26. So it took me 26 years to finally like claim my manhood. But when I look at this story, this humiliation, when I was 13 years old, it was one of my earliest times masturbating. And I masturbated into the tidy whities that I was so ashamed of, and I soiled them. And this became a ritual for me to always masturbate into white briefs. And something I never really thought about as an adult.
It's interesting.
But when I looked back, I thought that's kind of weird that it's always like tidy whities. And I'd even like type in tidy whitey stuff when I looked for porn. That was always more arousing than just men's underwear. And it caused so much embarrassment because, like, this is just such a weird fetish. Men's underwear is weird enough, but tidy whities, that's just really like embarrassing. I was too embarrassed to even say it in the previous podcast. Right. And so when I look at this story, and when I feel like a story collector in many ways. I just talk to many people, hear their stories. It's very common for fetishes to develop in this like puberty time, and for things to become sexualized. And for me, that feeling weak and pathetic and being humiliated totally got sexualized. And so my fantasies were always me being humiliated, or if I was angry, me humiliating someone else by putting them in white briefs. I kid you not. I did this for all the time that I struggled with um, sexual fantasy. And not to say that I don't struggle with it now, it's just not as frequent. Before I was like, it almost felt like every hour I would have just constant thoughts of sexual fantasy, and it made me really like concerned, like about my sexuality, and like you know I like it was so foggy for me, like I just didn't understand.
Hey, just a quick interruption to tell you about the 40-day up today at highnoon.org/challenge.
I just like to interject here because there's a couple things that really stand out. And one is the idea of sexual imprinting. And we've touched on that on this podcast before, but like when animals are born, there's certain animals that the first thing they see, they think it's their mom. And it could be a car, it could be anything, you know?
Right.
And that's how you can train ducks to like follow you anywhere you go, because certain ducks they imprint. But when we're in our formative years, right around pubescence, and we start to sexualize things, we start to imprint that's like our sexual template. That's what we expect is normal. That's what we think we want. And it's all being fed to us by our environment. And we're meant to be saved from that. Honestly, that time of our life should be reserved for uh, like not being spoon fed images and culture and all this that's sexual, because it's feeding us all the wrong ideas. We're meant to talk about this with our parents, to be honest. We're meant to figure this out together in a holistic, healthy way with the people in our environment, rather than sorting it out through ourselves and our immaturity and just assuming that I feel, so therefore I am, right? Which is kind of this generation. I feel this, therefore I am this. It can go very deep, run into in terms of your identity. But also in tandem with that kind of sexual imprinting, I just revisited the book Iron John, which talks about for thousands of years, humanity had a process for children to turn into adults. And it was always around 13. And it was tribal, and they all had different processes. Some of them were kind of violent, to be honest. There'd be an elder that would like punch the kids in the face. And their blood would be like, don't forget that life is fragile. You're a man now. You're not just a kid, which I don't necessarily consent to at all on any level. But the point is that there is always some ritual of a child around pubescence turning into a man, in the case of a boy, or girls turning into women. And there would always be elders involved, because they are the men. They are the ones teaching you how to be a man. And in our society, since we don't have these processes, the way that kids learn how to be, like boys learn how to be men, is from now TikTok or porn or Marvel movies or whatever. And they're creating this image that's all based on fantasy and fear and like all these weird emotions that they haven't sorted through. And they're now starting to cement that as, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I'm attracted to. This is what a woman should be and should look like, or men should be. So they're formulating all this opinion, but completely absent or devoid of a conversation with somebody who's in a stable marriage or stable position, who can help them sort through all this stuff. Because like you said, it's like a bunch of have-truths put into a soup. How do you sort through the ingredients when it's all in a soup of like, there's now good ingredients and there's poison now in this soup? You cannot just have a sip of that soup and assume that you're not sipping poison. So that's so much of our sexual template is born of this confused perspective that we had to figure out by ourselves, because our parents didn't talk to us about sex and all this stuff. And so you had to go through all this really confusing, really strong, is fueled by emotions. This replaying of your trauma through lust, which is so weird, but it's so human,
Right.
right? I don't
Right.
believe animals do this. I've never heard of dolphins having sex with rocks because they're angry, or with other species or anything like that out of emotional need. But humans associate sex and lust to hatred or resentment or all this. And it's so unhealthy. But now, not only is it accepted, but it's marketed to you in the form of a genre specifically tailor made for your lust, right? So now with the a la carte porn, there's like revenge porn and all this stuff that's fueled by super unhealthy emotions. And now your natural desire to want to connect through sex is associated heavily with these really super negative emotions that will never produce intimacy, which is the purpose of sexuality. So it's just a messy thing that needs to be sorted through.
Right. I agree. It needs to be sorted through. I
The hard work is not only what you need to do. Somebody just messaged me and said that they binge listened to a bunch of the podcasts, and I had the feeling like I needed to send them a disclaimer that could come with consequences. Your head will be filled with my voice, and that may or may not work out well for you. It'll always work out for me, right? Because, then I get just like whoever recorded the voice for Siri. It's a good gig for them. But then you just, every time you...
I think it's interesting because I'm trying to figure out why some of these podcasts are fun to listen to and what's harder to listen to. Not harder. Nothing's like hard to listen to, but like, right, like it's easy to be engaged, and it's kind of hard to be engaged with some of these podcasts. And it's not just with High Noon, it's like overall content creation, right? And what I'm kind of feeling out here is like, we need to tell more stories. We're talking about stuff, but it's a little harder to kind of feel when there's no like connection. And stories so easy to feel connection.
Like stupid Siri. So
I did that today actually. I changed the voice on my ChatGPT today because I was just frustrated with the voice. He just started sounding too like, people do this thing where they talk with an intonation, like, "Hey, how's it going? My name is Benji. This is a phone." Like everything's a question, even though it's not a question. And then I was noticing that, and I just got. Anyways, yeah. To your point,
It's called being Canadian. Canadians don't make a statement. If they want to tell you that they hate you, they'll be like, "I hate you."
I think, yeah.
You can't do it.
Right.
Yeah. So, guys and gals, listen up, okay? I was talking to a mentee, and it was just so clear that what he was struggling with was the difficult leap between knowing you have to do something difficult that you don't want to do and doing it. And I realize that's at the heart of most of our struggles, whether it's, especially with sexual integrity. Like, you imagine you're just at home minding your own business, and then I talked to another mentee, and he had a slip, and it's like, what happened? It's like, oh, he got into a fight with his mom, and then he was in a bad mood, and then he went to his room, and then he started zoning out, and blah blah blah. That right there, you're like, okay, then it's like emotional issues. Okay, that's like the easy thing to assess. But if you look a layer deeper, it's like, oh, you didn't like how that conversation ended, and you don't yet have the tools to have that difficult conversation to be like, I didn't like how this conversation ended, and I want to make this better, right? Which would then leave you feeling closer to that person, in this case, his mom. But it's, and then you walk away feeling like, oh, I love my mom. And then a completely different state going to bed than feeling butthurt, feeling like life isn't fair, feeling like people don't understand you, AKA let's just scroll for hours, right?
Yeah.
And so that leap of like doing the hard work isn't so clear all the time. Sometimes it's abundantly clear. Like, oh, I have an exam tomorrow and it's really
I'm
hard.
testing the limits of my
and
computer.
It means a lot to me, and I don't want to fail, and I also don't want to study, and so I'm just going to run away, right? So that's obvious. But then there's those subtle ones where the hard work, maybe you don't even know. Maybe like for me, it's, I thought I had my purpose in life from about 12 until 27. It was very clear what I needed to do. And then since joining the church, not so clear. So my struggles, deepest struggles of like doing something hard is like figuring out how to take the next step, even though I don't have that clear calling sign, like this is your purpose of life, right? So sometimes it's much more subtle, but the point remains that the hard work is not only what you need to do, but it's like what liberates you in the end, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Let's unpack that.
Yeah, give me some examples. I mean, the obvious ones come to mind are things with sexual integrity, porn, masturbation, because we both talk to people that are struggling with their integrity, and they don't want to be. They want to have integrity. They want to follow their values and follow their heart and their faith and their beliefs, but they are succumbed to, like you say, these feelings and lacking tools of knowing how to do it, right? One guy comes to mind in particular who, this was years ago, he was really struggling with porn, particularly, and I suggested out of nowhere, after listening to him, I was like, hey, why don't you get porn blocker, like software? And it just sounds like it'll help your situation in particular, right? And then he's like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be the guy that's relying on software just to not watch porn. And I was like, okay, sure, but what you're doing right now is not working, so why don't we try something else, right? And so I kind of dilly-dallied for a bit, and then eventually he realized on his own that the reason he wasn't doing it was not the reasons he thought, because that was exactly the thing he needed to do, is just to block access for him on his devices to using adult content, right? And by doing that, it wasn't the software itself that helped him, break free. It was the action of doing something that was hard and took a little courage and money and some skin in the game to actually do something, because it like sent this jolting signal through his entire system that like, I'm serious about this now. I don't know if this is going to work, but it's the thing I'm avoiding, and I was recommended to get it, to get some software, and then he did it, and it was really good for him, And so that was an example that came to mind of something that is like the hard thing to do, and we just avoid it because we make up reasons why it won't work or why we shouldn't do it. And for him, it was like, oh, I don't want to have a crutch. That's the word he used. I don't want to have a crutch to avoid my, behavior. But it actually saved him. And
So
that was
I'll
the thing
just-
you need to do. Yeah.
But it's like a triple layer of poetic justice or irony in the wrong context. This idea that I don't want a crutch So I'm just gonna stay reliant on the crutch that I know, which is porn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's
That's it.
that's the thing. So this idea that the hard thing is what liberates you is a really important point to suture into your heart and soul, because we are so addicted to wanting the results. We're in a very materialistic society that's all about the results. So like, oh man, there's an entire Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok channel that's dedicated to
I'm just testing to see the capabilities of my laptop right now. I'm lagging, but how bad is Minecraft lagging? So I'm running shaders. It's not a heavy shaders at all, but
いやちゃんと
yeah. It's pretty much
まずチャッピーがやったのは
really,
ちゃんと
really, really
ちゃんとというか
slow.
一緒ですね。あんまり変わらないんですけど、ちょっと下に置きま
It's
した。
not so bad, but
こんな感じ。でも私がちょっともっと自己啓発っぽくやってみたいな感じって言ったんですよ。大切なのはただ自分の行動や感情を記録することではありません。そこから本当に意味を見取り繰り返している思考や行動の癖に気づき、自分が成長させてあげているパターンを人生を豊かにするパターンへと置き換えていくことです。性的な誠実さを育てることは自分
oh
を
my
自
gosh.
分を知ること、そして自分の本当の欲求に気づき、より自分らしく、より理想の自分へと近づいていくことがこれの目的です。
Okay, let me try something. I'm gonna hide this preview. Let's see how
でも結構
it doesn't do much. Yep. You need a beefy computer, and those cost a lot of money.
自分の本当の欲求に気づきみたいな。
There's gotta be buried treasure here. No way there isn't. Oh, actually, it's running. Okay, let's try resource video settings. Let's try lower render distance and shaders, and we'll just off. We'll just select off.
なんて変えれますかね、一番下。
We'll make Minecraft very low.
今と一緒ですよね。できるのかな。はい。なんかね、俳優って言葉で使ってないかも、私今いつも。
difference is pretty much the same. Oh, wait. It's pretty smooth.
自分の心の
Oh
声を
shoot,
丁寧
wait.
に聞き、自分らしさに責任を持ちながら、理想の自分に向かって誠実に歩んでいくための
Nice.
習慣に。ちょっとね、
F3.
自分の
I pressed 3 by accident. Okay. Sick.
あ、めっちゃいいじゃないですか。そうしましょう。うん、水なしでいいかもしれない。うん。今でもなんか昼寝しそうかもしれない。
Challenged with sexual integrity,
うん。
right? The reason is that there's a certain need that's missing. They need more love, they need more attention, they need someone to listen to them more. So like, you know, knowing that they need more time, they need more patience or gratitude, something like that. So how they fill those needs, so like meet your needs is like
What
not
you really want, like
yeah, but what you really need.
like a deep relationship with family,
Yeah.
そうだし connection.
So. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
まあ本当に本然の本然の世界での話ですねこれは。ありがとうだってアイコン。ありがとうね。
Ooh, lag spike. Why? Okay. So.
まあね、無条件の愛だったりそうだし。
Okay. Just need iron. That's pretty lame.
もう書いちゃうとかつながりや無条件の愛など本来の自分が求めているものに気づき長いけどもう書いちゃうこっちのことだぞってこっちのことだぞって言ったかしら。
How do I do the pie charts? I should have looked that up. Because come on, it's a beach. Oh my god. And then there's ocean, right? should have crafted a boat. This is so dumb. That was dumb of me.
どうですか。そしてつながりや無条件の愛など、
That's not even a boat
本当に求めているものに気づき、
or a sunken ship.
そしてより理想の自分へと。
Okay, lag.
これより自分らしくってのけていいですか。なんかちょっとすごい。そしてつながりや無条件の愛。自分が本当に求めているものに気づき、より理想の自分。
Oh, nice.
うん、いい。
Not nice. I see that. Some guardians.
そうです。結構もう長いですね。
I should have made a boat. I can still make a boat.
そういうことです。 はい。
This is actually a pretty cool seed. I'm not gonna lie. It's got a lot.
いい。だいぶ
Well, it doesn't
だ
have
い
that
ぶ
much,
読み
but
やすくなってると思い
it
ます
has
よ。
some stuff. I'm gonna pretend like I really know how to play Minecraft. Was this cool?
何年も分野ずっと戦っているにもかかわらず、他の
Ooh.
他の人間たちが
Okay.
この世で自分にその先は楽しみだと。
Why am I lagging so much? Where's the chest? Oh my god. Actually, this lag is unbearable. Where is the chest?
すみません、私水取ってきていいですか。
It's so unbearable. Oh my gosh. Okay, I tested it out. It is not good for streaming. Let's see.
ここちょっとしんどい。
Yep. I still am really laggy when I try to stream games. Just a test. Just testing. So let me. Yep. That's good to know. pause that. We'll just end stream.